Thank you. Was a heart full of gratitude on behalf of the people of South Africa and my President, His Excellency President Matamela Ramaphosa, that we want to say to you that the deep respect we have for you as an individual, the deep respect we have for your country. And today, if you could read our hearts, you will read one word on it, which is gratitude. I want to thank you, and you've sent, and I don't even know if it's diplomatic for me to say this, but your High Commissioner is one of my best friends I have here. She has managed to hurt me deeply one day with a sentence where she said, "Minister, I never knew Ellis Park can be this quiet." It was on the occasion where Australia beat that rare occasion, that once in a lifetime occasion. And she said to me, "Minister, I never knew Ellis Park can be this quiet." I was deeply hurt. But she's a person that does a lot for our country. At the relations, everybody loves her. And it is my singular honor to call High Commissioner Tegan Brink. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister McKenzie, and good morning, colleagues and friends. Australia's Prime Minister, the Honourable Anthony Albanese MP, has been a lifelong opponent of racism and has had an enduring interest in and commitment to the struggle against apartheid and South Africa's transition to democracy. As an intrepid young man in the 1980s, he backpacked in Southern Africa. But he didn't come here, as the Minister said, because the country was still under the yoke of apartheid. Instead, he travelled to what are known here at Freedom Park as the frontline states of Zambia, Zimbabwe and Botswana. As a student, Anthony Albanese helped to found the Students Against Racism group at Sydney University, and he provided support to the ANC's representative in Australia, Eddie Fundi, which was controversial at the time. When Nelson Mandela was released from prison in 1990, Anthony Albanese was part of the delegation that welcomed him to Sydney, to the Trades Hall and to the iconic Opera House. Now, Anthony Albanese entered Parliament in 1996, 2 years after President Nelson Mandela was sworn in, and a year later, he travelled for the first time with a parliamentary delegation to the new South Africa. He visited Robben Island with the ANC whip, Henry Magotti, at the time. He met with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and with the National Assembly. And he visited adult literacy and health projects in Khayelitsha, funded by Australia. Years later, and when he was a shadow minister at this point, Anthony Albanese gave a moving tribute to Nelson Mandela upon his death. He remarked that while Nelson Mandela said he visited Australia to thank us for our support to end apartheid, in fact, we should thank Mandela for making the world a better place by his example. It is now my distinct pleasure and privilege to welcome Prime Minister Albanese to deliver his remarks. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency, for those generous comments, and I thank very much the Honourable Minister Gayton McKenzie for his generous remarks as well. To former Ministers Sisulu, Nidu and Hanekom, and former Premier Deepiko, and the other veterans of the struggle against apartheid who are with us here today. In particular, it is my great honour to have met my dear friend, Eddie Fundi's son, the late Eddie Fundi. Eddie Fundi came to Australia and made such an enormous difference in lifting up the consciousness of Australians about the impact of the apartheid regime, a crime against humanity here in South Africa, but a crime against humanity across the board. One that needed incredible courage in particular, of course, by the people here in South Africa, struggling for their human rights, struggling for freedom and struggling for democracy. And friends, it is an incredible honour for me to be here at Freedom Park. I would regard this as one of the honours of my life, that in those dark days, to imagine as a student organising for boycotts against the South African regime, that I would be coming to this place, this sacred place, to pay tribute to 3 Australians who assisted the struggle of the people of South Africa for freedom and democracy. That I would be coming here as Australia's Prime Minister was something that I couldn't possibly have imagined. This is a place dedicated to commemorating all those who supported the free and democratic South Africa and to fostering understanding and reconciliation between all peoples. Today we pay tribute to 3 Australians who embodied these causes: former Prime Ministers Malcolm Fraser and Bob Hawke, and the former diplomat Bruce Haig. In recognition of their courage and their commitment, their names will be forever inscribed here on this wall. Malcolm Fraser knew that by dividing us by race diminished us all. If the legendary Australian cricketer Donald Bradman was still alive. Years later, when Mandela was president, Malcolm Fraser gave him a cricket bat signed by the Don in recognition of a great unfinished innings. Bob Hawke was every bit as committed to the anti-apartheid cause. 12 years before he was elected Prime Minister, he led the Australian Union movement's boycott of the Springboks' 1971 tour of Australia. Something that Bob Hawke in his later years and I had an opportunity to discuss, as I did with other activists of that time, people like Meredith Bergman and others who were vilified in Australia for the action that they took, storming onto the field, being arrested, standing up in Australia against any sporting contest is something that doesn't come natural, but it's something that was absolutely necessary because of the love of sport, and the Minister was very undiplomatic in recognising the fact that it is unusual for the Wallabies to beat the Springboks at Ellis Park. He could have gone broader and said it's unusual for us to beat the Springboks anywhere, which is the truth. But Bob Hawke led the union movement at that time, a courageous position which was ahead of its time. As Hawke later recounted, he said this: "We had an obligation to act ahead of public opinion in the hope that the public would come to understand. Australia and the world proved him right. As Prime Minister, Bob Hawke upheld the ban on South African sporting tours that Fraser had instituted, and he built international support for financial sanctions against South Africa, action that South Africa's then Finance Minister described as the dagger that finally immobilised apartheid." Australian diplomat Bruce Haig arrived in South Africa in mid-1976. The Soweto riots had broken out just 2 weeks earlier, and Haig said the shame of apartheid confronted him very quickly. He was far from the highest-ranking official at the Australian Embassy in Pretoria, but he felt he had to do something, and the constraints of bureaucracy wouldn't stop him. He met with the anti-apartheid activist Steve Biko, who later died in custody in 1977 after being severely beaten by police. He also befriended newspaper editor Donald Woods, an outspoken critic of the regime who introduced him to Desmond Tutu. Later, Hawke famously helped Woods escape from South Africa to Lesotho, a feat depicted, of course, in Richard Attenborough's brilliant film, Cry Freedom. Hawke also visited political prisoners in detention and delivered funds from the World Council of Churches to their families. He carried messages between banned activists and supporters in South Africa and abroad, and he took medicines and letters to refugees in exile. Hawke continued his anti-apartheid advocacy back home in Australia. He helped set up Ifa Letu Foundation to repatriate black South African art taken out of the country during apartheid. The personal collection he donated in 2005 began the collection, which now consists of hundreds of works. Just 8 months after his release from prison in February 1990, Nelson Mandela came to Australia. He chose to visit Australia because of the anti-apartheid stance of our government and the millions of Australians who lent their support to it. Your actions, he said, gave us the strength and confidence that our just cause would prevail. I had the extraordinary honour and privilege of meeting Mandela at the Sydney Trades Hall and at the major event that was held at the Sydney Opera House. He was a magnetic presence, and like so many around the world, Mandela's commitment to peace and justice inspired me then and continues to do so today. He strove to heal the divisions of the past and forgive his oppressors. As the Minister has said, when I visited in my first ever parliamentary delegation I participated in 1977 and met with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, it was extraordinary that after so much brutality, violence and oppression, the then leaders of the new South Africa were prepared to not just forgive, but to reach out that hand of friendship for reconciliation here in South Africa. While the oppression of the regime that Mandela stood against is long gone, of course, the power and the resonance of his leadership still endures today. Malcolm Fraser, Bob Hawke and Bruce Haig represent the best of who we are as Australians, that instinct that Australians have for equality, for justice, for fairness and for decency. And, of course, Nelson Mandela's commitment, vision, compassion and resilience can still teach us today. The way that we bring these Australian values with us when we engage with the world is something that I hope endures for a long period of time. The names Fraser, Hawke and Haig will now stand alongside all those who supported South Africa in its struggle for liberation, and their deeds will live in our memory, a reminder that no matter how long the walk to freedom, courage, kindness and solidarity will get us there. I thank you.
All right, you've been watching live visuals there from Freedom Park in Pretoria. That's where Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is about to preside over a wreath-laying ceremony for 3 struggle stalwarts from Australia who are being honoured as part of, I suppose, many others who've really paid the ultimate price for righting the injustices of the past. He is being hosted by Sports, Arts and Culture Minister Gayton McKenzie as they essentially undertake this process. Albanese, of course, is in the country in the lead-up to the G20 Summit. In fact, he was one of the first few leaders who arrived at OR Tambo International Airport yesterday. And I see they're observing a moment of silence. Let's just take in these sights and sounds as they do exactly that. Right, that wreath-laying ceremony will continue in Pretoria. It's certainly one of the side events that are taking place in the lead-up to the main G20 Summit. What I should also add, by the way, is that Albanese's own track record as a politician in his country is certainly centered around this idea of righting the wrongs of the past, for lack of a better term. And in fact, part of the key policies in Australia that really drove up his own popularity is when he sought to recognize the Aboriginal people in Australia. Let's continue listening in.
I say Comrade Mani Dipicho, I say Comrade Lindiwe Sisulu, I say Comrade Derek Hanekom, they are sincerely and heartily welcomed. Thank you very much. Deputy Minister, you are a resident here. You are not a guest. You are one of us, because ordinarily we would not be doing these events without your presence. I'm acutely aware that we are laboring under the tyranny of time, and I would not want to belabor the point. Suffice to say, thank you. Thank you very much. You know, in one of our African languages, in Setswana, there's a proverb. They say, "Montsama isabusihu, emoleboa hosele." He who accompanies me at night, I find time during day to thank them. We have found time during daybreak, in this African Manhattan sun, to sincerely thank you. We relish in your glow of your presence and in the sacrifices that your country has made for our freedom. We thank you very much. Thank you.
One of the side events that are taking place in the lead-up to the G20's main summit, the G20 Leaders Summit at Nasrec, the Australian Prime Minister, once again, Anthony Albanese, part of a wreath-laying ceremony to honour 3 Australians who died during the fight against apartheid in South Africa, and we'll certainly keep a close eye on those developments.